nobody knows is going to happen, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. This is very serious. There's a group of guys who I've known for about 18, 19 months who are senior intel and aerospace operatives out of some desert locations. I'm not going to mention where they are. I've been to them, where most of the R&D testing and operations dealing with so-called UFOs, UAPs occur. Now, this guy, the main guy, has 6 other black sites, as they're called, operational sites that are very secretive, and these particular ones are ones that are rogue and been running illegally for a long time. He is coming forward in the next 30 days or so, maybe less, with the evidence and unmasking himself and some of his operators, special forces guys, about what's going on at these sites, and with evidence. In other words, he's been operational when they have targeted and downed extraterrestrial vehicles. He's been present when they've tested man-made UFOs, which are mostly what people see, that are essentially anti-gravity craft. And he's been present when there are a number of illegal operations that have occurred, including the incidental hitting and downing of civilian private planes that go up over this test area after a temporary flight restriction has gone up. So there are innocent people who've been murdered, and there's no evidence that they were hit. So these are serious guys. The main guy I've been dealing with, I know some of the others, has been in those operations for 29 years, since the 1995 period, but he was very young. At that time, he didn't know he was involved in an illegal and unsanctioned operation. He does now, and they're fed up with it, and they want to come forward. Now, in advance of that, because what he's going to bring forward would be, I understand, if he can get this done in the next 3 weeks or so, would be the videos, the evidence, the proof, not only of the NHI, as they call them, non-human intelligence craft and bodies and beings, but of the man-made ones, and also of some operations that involve the transport of humans in experimental operations from distressed areas around the world. Now, as you know, we have a whistleblower who's a Marine who came across this in 2009 in Indonesia after there was an earthquake and tsunami. And he came across an operation of what looked like an octagonal disc that was about 300 feet across, size football field, that was levitating above a clearing in the jungle. And his platoon came across this. They were almost killed by these operators who were American, but did not look like they were any part of any armed forces insignia or uniform. Yeah. And they had crated up and were transporting humans who were barely alive. And they said, look, you can come with us. And then those were moved over into, we found later, experimental programs at some of these STIFs, these subterranean facilities, underground bases. So all of this is a very complex story. They have the goods, they have the proof. This will be the biggest disclosure related to these sort of issues in history. Well, I say it's going to be the biggest disclosure in human history, period. So in advance of that, these fascists and criminals that have, at the core of these covert operations, have been launching these sort of decoy drone events, and also orbs. People are seeing these orb-like things. Yeah. Those aren't extraterrestrial either. 100% of it's man-made. And we can unpack that. Then this is a huge problem, because this is going to happen during this transition before the next president comes in. I've been, doing kind of shuttle briefings from London to the incoming presidential team and the existing leaders at the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committee. So I've just been going flat out, for the last few months, because we've known about this for some time. Now, this last flurry of all this activity, there are various reasons I think are being given inside at a Peterson Air Force Base and a couple other operational facilities that these drones are part of a black budget project because they're sniffing out potentially a dangerous weapon that's gone loose or something like that. Mm-hmm. Now, I've heard that from several very good, highly placed folks in the intelligence community. That could also be a misdirect to create panic and concern. But I do know that this is very serious. It's not just people misidentifying small aircraft. And these actually are part of a covert rogue military and corporate organization that I've been blowing the whistle on for 30 years. In fact, the way I knew this operation was illegal was when I briefed President Clinton's first CIA director on the matter, and on December 13th, 1993. So it's 31 years ago this past week. And he and the president had no access or knowledge of these programs. And remember, my uncle and other people I knew worked Northrop Grumman and these Lockheed Skunk Works programs, and I had all the evidence already in 1993. And so at that point, we did conclude that the operations dealing with this subject, even though it's the butt of a lot of jokes and whatnot, little green men, haha, that is actually being run very secretively, but also illegally without the oversight of the Congress or the president. Now, there are people embedded in the White House, National Security Council, Congress, who are operatives who actually are there to gaslight and deceive the senior members of the Senate and the House. But for the most part, it has gone unsupervised since about 1957 to 1959, when this organization decided to tell Eisenhower and his folks to go jump in the lake. And they took all these projects deep black, meaning illegal. And there is a legal budget of the United States. It's the black budget that only the president and a handful of senators and congressmen see. But this is beyond that. That's beyond their oversight and supervision. So you can imagine how dangerous that is. And we're not talking a trivial amount of money. I'd say since the late 50s, 60s, somewhere on the order of $8 to $10 trillion have gone into those kind of projects from various agencies and departments. So, we're talking, what's that, a third of our national debt. But the other problem, and this is the biggest one, I just might as well drop this bomb at the beginning.
Absolutely.
No, I haven't started yet.
No pun intended.
Yeah, bro, I ain't started yet. So what has happened is that if you can visualize 75 years of some of the most brilliant scientists and engineers on planet Earth, who sometimes identify in high school, college, postgrad, are pulled into these covert programs to study the extraterrestrial material, meaning the craft, the technologies, and what have you. By late 1950s, there were operational man-made UFOs that were anti-grav type devices. And we have schematics of them, we have images of them, and people often will see those and think it's alien. I go, oh, no, it didn't. My uncle's company, Northrop Grumman, built that one, the triangle, right? Or Raytheon, or Lockheed Skunk Works. So now we get this, now go forward 75 years and that kind of money and brain power studying this kind of material. And you have some technologies that are in the hands of these rogue and criminal elements, there's no other way to word it, that are way beyond the power of, say, a thermonuclear weapon or something like that, because you're dealing with being able to move across space-time at multiples of the speed of light, all kinds of advanced tech. And those can be used in what are called deceptive indications and warnings, or false flag operations. So some of what you see with this sort of phenomenon, occasionally it will be actually what they call NHI, or non-human intelligence. I'd say 80-90% of the time it's ours, but very advanced. Now, some of it's clunky, like our old-fashioned drones with rotors, and some of them are loud that have been reported because they have regular conventional engines. There's some of the objects that have been put up over some of these sites in their military installations are not so prosaic, and they're advanced. And this is why some members of Congress and even people in the Pentagon think, oh, well, maybe it's an adversary, or maybe it's from outer space. It isn't. It's all from this rogue group, because they have technologies that at this point in 2024 would almost be indistinguishable from an actual extraterrestrial vehicle. Not quite, but very advanced. And I have a number of whistleblowers who come forward describing those, particularly the ones I think out of Raytheon and a few other corporate operations. So remember, Ben Rich told a member of my team before Ben Rich was the head of the famous Lockheed Skunk Works. He said, anything you can imagine, we've already done at the Lockheed Skunk Works. He said, not at Area 51. The real action is the Lockheed Skunk Works. It's in underground facilities. And he says, anything you've seen portrayed on Star Trek, we can do it, and we've done it. So now this.
Well, wait a minute. You can beam people? Because that seems like the coolest thing. Beam me down to a planet.
They do. Yeah, they do have technologies for what's called teleportation. Of course, in physics, if you look it up, it's happened with particles through the what's called entanglement, quantum entanglement, where every point in space and time is interconnected. But with the kind of technology they've been able to study that are NHI or extraterrestrial, those are so advanced, you're obviously not going to be going from one star system to another at anything that's the speed of light. You're going to have to go through an entangled aspect of the universe through gravity. It kind of like that. It's more the creation of through gravitational waves, being able to basically bend space and time. So if you look at point A to B through 1,000 light years of space, and look at it as a straight line, like on a piece of paper, fold the piece of paper. They're like this. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the sort of technology. Unfortunately, some of the worst people on the planet have it. It is not known by, I don't know of a president since I've been working on this who's been read in or briefed on it properly.
Right.
It's covert, rogue, military, corporate. I'd say the center of power on this is corporate. But there are people who are embedded in the Pentagon and even in the House and Senate. And I know who a couple of them are. I'm not going to go into it too much right here, but they're part of that organization. And they're mainly there to just, none of this is true. And to just sort of gaslight their colleagues. Because, like the Senate is a club of 100 guys and women. And it's not hard to deceive them. And, if it's coming from one of your senior colleagues, you're going to think it's real. Like if a doctor tells another doctor or a lawyer, another lawyer, there's a built-in affinity group, sort of credibility. So those have been embedded. And there are people embedded within the Pentagon, although to get people up to speed on how kind of, as screwed up you think Washington is, it's more screwed up. And this spate of drone and other strange sightings, it really is to induce fear, because one of the plans, if you remember, I don't know if you guys remember Wernher von Braun. He invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler. Okay, so his spokeswoman for the last 5 years of his life, he was dying of liver cancer, is on our team, Carol Rosen. And she was the first woman executive in the aerospace industry. And back in 1974, Wernher von Braun said to her, what we're going to do, we're going to hoax an alien to consolidate sort of a totalitarian power around the world, because it'll be so frightening to people. They will give up their freedoms and they will, et cetera, and so on. Sort of like the overreaction, but on a much larger scale, what happened with COVID and 9/11 and the Gulf of Tonkin into Vietnam. So that kind of operation has been going on for a very long time. This is the granddaddy of them. This is the one that people have feared.
Is this Blue Beam, or is that something else?
I do not have that code name. People talk about Project Blue Beam. I think that's just a name attached to this. The people I work with who actually read into and been involved in that plan, and I have debriefed people involved with that plan very specifically, beginning in the mid-90s. None of them have used that term. So I'm very careful. I'm a scientist. I'm a trauma doctor. I try to avoid, the rubbish that's on the internet. Because most of it is rubbish. But at the same time, if there's a name attached to it like that, it's a code word, what they're called code word projects. I don't know it, but I know what the project is. And I know people who have been operational to fulfill it. Back in 1997, we had a man who came to Washington to provide some information at meetings I was having. And he had been on an interagency committee, and they could basically hit a button and start hoaxing the kind of nonsense you're seeing now to make people think there's some alien. So I think this is where we're very vulnerable. Neither the media nor the public nor our leaders are properly briefed and have enough of the information. What this man and his team defecting with will put that to rest if they're successful. And I think they will be, frankly. I heard from him yesterday after I received it and was told I was going to be arrested as a Russian spy. Can you believe it? Me and Tulsi Gabbard are being Russian spies. Anyway, the whole thing is just so bizarre. But this is the kind of games that are played. It's to be expected. It's stressful, obviously, but this man's very courageous. I mean, they're real patriots. Absolutely. Actually. These are real patriots who. One of them, who was driving me in an armored vehicle last year in the LA area, going out to the desert, said, "Thank you for what you're doing for those of us stuck on the other side." That's what he said. And he was referring to the fact these are good guys who got moved without their knowledge. It just crept up on them, where they realized once they got high enough in the program that they were in an illegal and unconstitutional